maybe not people watching this from America, because I think most Americans don't vacation in Cuba, although some do. Maybe Canadians, they more vacation in Cuba.
There's a lot of vacations.
So you think, okay, I'm going to go take a nice fat vacation on the island of Cuba, help their local economy out, help the people living in Cuba by spending some of my money over there in Cuba. However, it appears that not all that money is hitting the pockets of the Cuban people. Chris?
Big shock, right? Who would have thought? Communist country run by a leader that's a totalitarian. Yeah, so we know Cuba. If you're in America, you know that we almost got involved in probably an annihilation event related to Cuba back in a little while ago when someone else's uncle was in power. But if you were walking through New York City, I'm gonna set the scene here. If you were walking through New York City a couple days ago and you were outside of our office, you might have seen this up outside. This is a billboard that was put up to commemorate the August 13th date, the birthday of our glorious leader of Cuba over there, Fidel Castro. And it's a big sign. It says 100 years of Fidel Castro. And it's right out there in New York. It's right outside of our office on 34th. I'm looking at this thing like, what is this? 100 years? And it's wrong. He was born in 1926. It's 2025. It's not even communist in math, you know? We'll get back to that. But Cuba is having a number of issues right now. They keep popping up in the stories that I read because I'm very interested in communist countries. So recently they had their Labor and Social Security Minister, Marta Elena Fierro Cabrera, and she went on TV and she made a pretty bold statement. Let's take a look at what she said.
These people are recovering recyclable material, and what they're doing is illegal self-employment that violates the tax system because they are engaging in an economic activity without paying anything to the Cuban tax system.
They are disguised as beggars. They are not beggars. There are no beggars in Cuba. And so what they are doing is also that they found an easy way of living to earn money and not work as required with the corresponding formalities.
So yeah, there's the labor and I should say former labor and Social Security Minister, because she was canned after that statement. Imagine going on TV when you literally have people rummaging through trash cans to make a living and saying, you're engaged in unauthorized capitalism.
Oh, that's what she was talking about?
And not only that, people who wipe windshields when a car stops, those are also criminals, and there are no beggars in Cuba. That's the last part. There's no beggars in Cuba. There's no beggars in Cuba. They're doing, you know, Cuba does as Cuba does. So let's actually take a look and see what's going on in Cuba. Let's see how people are lighting up their homes in Cuba.
Let's see.
Have they achieved real communism yet?
That's the thing. I mean, people in Cuba, when they heard that, when they basically heard that there's no beggars, that, you know, they went crazy. And rarely do you see the Communist Party of Cuba act in such a swift fashion as to remove this woman. They basically looked at what she was saying the same way we would look at what this guy is saying.
Some type of a learning disability. We've seen many, many children healed. We've seen midgets grow. We've seen arms and legs that stop growing because of growth cells that stop.
Yeah, so
we don't do commercials like we used to.
Yeah, those kids didn't recover, and let me tell you, 100 years of Castro, and they haven't recovered. They're still paying the price of communism. So Cuba, country of 11 million, basically, just under that. And it is the closest communist country to the United States. It's 90 miles off of the coast of Key West, Florida, if you don't count parts of Brooklyn and California, which might set up their own communist state soon. But they're making headlines because their currency is currently in free fall. Reuters ran an article just on the 11th. Cuban currency hits record low as dollarization gains ground. The peso is 400 pesos per dollar. Mm-hmm. And it's depreciated 25% in a year. It used to be 305 pesos for a dollar. The government still maintains a transfer rate at 24 pesos for $1. And they have all their special economic zones in Cuba where people are given the tease of, oh, you can start a business. But in order to transact in dollars, they have to give all of their money away and vice versa to get to that 24 rate, even though their peso is basically worthless. So the top story that I want to highlight about Cuba is this crazy expose that came out of the Miami Herald. Of course, Miami is a Cuban hotspot. You know, a lot of people fled Cuba. They came to Miami. They set up a really strong community there, so much so that like 70% of the population down there speaks Spanish. And there are a lot of Cuban American immigrants there. This was titled, "Where is Cuba's Money? Secret records show the military has a massive cash hoard." So while those people are heating their homes with like trash, and they're making little makeshift generators because the country can't figure out its electrical system, but there are no beggars. The Cuban military, through GESA, which is basically a military corporation that's totally outside of the purview of any elected official in Cuba or like some of the appointed leaders, has $18 billion of US currency in their secret bank accounts. They basically, someone who was working for this GESA sent information over to the Miami Herald, and they were kind of probing and showing them, things are really bad. You should take a look at this. This information is, we know that the country is stealing money, but they didn't know it was to this extent. So the 18 billion that they have, it's more than, it's a ridiculous number for a country like this. It's more than the international reserves of Costa Rica, Uruguay, Panama, or all of their state-run oil companies. They pulled in $2.1 billion in profits just in the first quarter of last year. They have $14 billion in cash reserves. And how are they getting this money? Well, just like you mentioned in the introduction, they're creating like hotels in Havana. They're building skyscrapers in Cuba, and the military owns them. And 55% of all hotels in Cuba are run by the Cuban military. The Revolutionary Armed Forces, they're called. They also manage their gas stations, their dollar stores, their supermarkets, their money transfers, and their currency exchange systems, all of their special economic zones. All of the money is really just going to the military, and they have two sets of books, one in pesos and one in dollars. And they do not turn over the one that's in dollars. And they only pay tax on 1% of what they report for pesos, which is ridiculous in Cuba. Everyone else is paying ridiculous taxes.
So in other words, there's no hope of overthrowing the system in Cuba when the military is that rich.
Well, yeah, basically. If you do have this elected body, they're just going to laugh at you because all the money's with the military. So they're basically an unofficial central bank. They have no oversight, no audits. Actually, the head auditor of Cuba, this was actually last year, the comptroller was talking about this issue just from a question that a journalist gave her. And she said, well, I basically can't audit the GESA. That's not my purview. And she was replaced the next day for revealing that state secret. They don't even want that to come out. Because the people in Cuba are suffering under, it was Fidel, then it became Raul, when a little before Fidel passed away 2016, and he took over, then Raul relinquished control. And now it's run by an elected leader who was actually appointed by Raul Castro. So it's not really an election. They're doing some interesting projects here. So they like I said, zero taxes on their dollar reserves, 1% taxes on what they're getting in pesos. But they're having a severe crisis right now. Their agricultural reserves, their farms, everything is failing. They've had some pretty bad humidity and different issues. They can't have wheat. They've actually downgraded their rations to the amount of, like, they said the weight was comparable per person to like a small cookie. Wow. for each individual in your household. They still have a ration system in Cuba, which is usually, you think of just in a wartime. Actually, everyone in Cuba has a booklet at home where they have to submit their coupons for how many people are living in there, and they get a certain amount of money. So imagine each one of us would get about a cookie's worth of wheat in a day. So while they've been, actually, they invest less now, 4% less in their agricultural sector. They put 37% of government investments in these hotels that are run by the military. But they've lost 62% of revenue because a lot of people just are choosing not to go to Cuba. And why would you when they have blackouts and when you can't heat the places?
Is this because you tell me that the hotels in Cuba are run by the military. I'm not I'm not surprised that that's the case. But do you know if the people are aware of that fact? Like, is that an open secret or is it?
It is not an open secret.
Uh-huh.
It is quite literally a secret. That's why when this blew up, you saw a lot of Cubans who have access to Telegram and other sites, like basically going crazy. I mean, they're all looking at this stuff now. Russia just came out and they said, we're going to invest $1 billion into Cuba and help you guys out. That's their Project 2030, they're calling it. And then you have that compounded with Marco Rubio's now in the State Department. He's not, his family comes from Cuba. They're not happy about what's going on over there. He just hit them with sanctions on Thursday because they found out that Cuba was sending doctors from Cuba to all these different countries in Brazil, in parts of Africa, and they were basically treating them as slaves. They were exporting human beings. They were having them practice medicine in foreign countries. They were taking all of the money that those people earned. The people who went who were females were getting sexually abused. They didn't even know when the doctors left what their final destination was. They had overseers. It's kind of like North Korea. I mean, it's exactly like that, where they have this foreign worker base that's performing all of these tasks for Kim Jong-un. But here, for the Cuban government, you have doctors, highly trained people who are basically acting as servants for the regime. And I mentioned that. That's not the only people that they're exporting, but it's 75% of the workers that they're exporting. They also have teachers and different people in like engineering and architecture who are going out as well.
All right, let me ask you this final question. I remember a few years ago, was it 2022 or 23? There was like a big uprising in Cuba to the point where a lot of people, I think myself included, but I mean, what do I know? But a lot of people thought that it would be the end of the regime because it was just such a widespread protest. It was happening across the whole island.
The Cuba Es Libre movement, that whole movement kicked off, and people really thought they were going to see change. You had Pitbull, you had other people like bringing Cuba to into people's consciousness, because a lot of people don't think about Cuba. It's close. But yeah, with all of this happening, there's really no. So far, maybe we can look to this. Maybe this comes out and something happens, but. So far it's pretty grim. I mean, you really can't fight a revolution if you're starving.
Yeah, that's a good point. Well, there you have it. That's the update in Cuba. Any last thoughts you want to share with the audience about that?
Yeah, I mean, look to what happens in the State Department. They continue to put out these sanctions, and they're going after a lot of these state-run companies like China has that are really just working as arms of the Cuban government, or in this case, not the Cuban government, but the Cuban military. It's like the work front department in China. So let's see if more of these people come under sanctions and the quality of life goes up or down, because the people are just getting punished. That's the problem.
Yeah. So if you're thinking about taking a nice quick vacation to Cuba, just know the hotel you're staying at is likely owned by the Cuban military.
Yes.
And your money is going directly to the Cuban military rather than Raul, the guy who you think owns the hotel, the nice guy, but that's not likely who owns the hotel. He's just the front. Anyway, thank you so much for joining us. If you have a chance, consider listening to some Taylor Swift songs. They're very good. What's your favorite song?
I don't have one.
All right, whatever. The 1989 album. Listen to that one. It's
your favorite.
All right, I know exactly what you're thinking. That was a great clip you just watched. Now, if you're watching on YouTube, make sure to follow and also check out either these videos or maybe they're on this side. I don't know which side they're on, but we set it up. So these are the videos that YouTube is suggesting to you as the best ones that you'll probably like the most. So check them out, this side,